welcome to Gamecock Pod Live.
For the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be committed to the University of South Carolina.
This is Rodgers again to the 25, 20, 15, 10. Rodgers scores!
Jackie Bradley Jr. delivered for the Gamecocks. Lost it up, looking for Kelly. Touchdown! Can you believe it?
And South Carolina is sending shockwaves through the SEC.
Frederick! Plays it in at the buzzer! That's a win! Unbelievable! I don't believe it!
And now, live from Studio 54 of the Gamecock Pod Studios, here's the Cockfather himself, Keith Alsep.
All right, everybody, welcome into Gamecock Pod Live for Wednesday, June the 7th, episode number 1234. And yes, I am a New York metropolitan insulter. The Braves come from 4-1 down last night, score 4 runs in the bottom of the 6th to take the lead, and then got an insurance run in the bottom of the 8th. And Raul Iglesias did what he does, which was shut them down. Also a great outing for Mentor last night, who's been scuttling a bit. So the Braves beat the Mets. Mets now losers of 4 straight, and nobody's happier than me and Chipper Jones. All right, so in just a few minutes, we will be joined by Hale McGranahan from thebigspur.com. Go ahead and get in the Nana's chat box. Leave your questions. But before Hale joins us, let's go ahead and get into our Nana's Porch news, notes, and headlines. So let's start with a couple of WNBA notes. Aaliyah Boston last night absolutely killed it. So did Asia Wilson. Let's look at what they did last night. Aaliyah Boston, a career high 25 points and 11 rebounds, 12 of 15 from the field, 1 of 1 from the free throw line, and 2 block shots in 39 minutes. Asia Wilson, the reigning MVP, 2-time MVP, Olympic gold medalist and world champion, she had 23 points on 9 of 13 from the field, 5 of 6 from the free throw line, 10 rebounds, 2 steals, and 4 block shots. So both of those former number 1 picks, former Gamecocks, absolutely crush it last night. One somber note to pass along, and that is the Iron Sheik, Hussein the Arab, otherwise known as the Iron Sheik, former Mid-Atlantic wrestling from when I was a kid. I actually saw him in person in the summer of 1980. I want to say maybe 79 or 80. The Miss South Carolina pageant was going on, and something else was going on at Greenville Memorial Auditorium. And so for 2 of those weeks, Liberty High School, we hosted Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, and Ken Patera, the Iron Sheik, Greg and Johnny Valentine, Rowdy Roddy Piper, Blackjack Mulligan, all of those guys But one weekend it was in the gym, and one weekend it was down outside at the football stadium. And it was just magnificent. Me and some of my friends, Gary Whitmire and Michael McJunkins, we would go to wrestling every Monday night in the Greenville Memorial Auditorium, otherwise known as the Brown Box. Downtown, it's now a parking lot. But the Iron Sheik passes away at the age of 81, and so RIP to the Iron Sheik. All right, football recruiting, which will be a big topic of conversation here on the show today. Official visits have been added. We'll get the latest from Hale McGranahan. South Carolina expecting now 9 or 10 official visitors. We talked yesterday about Fred J.R. Johnson, the 6'3.5", 225-pound linebacker from Maury High School in Norfolk, Virginia, not Richmond. Got to correct myself there. Norfolk, Virginia. But the Gamecocks bringing in another DMV, 4-star defensive end, D.D. Holmes, 6'6", 245 pounds, out of Gonzaga High School in the district. Same school as Caleb Williams. He will visit South Carolina this weekend. He's also visited Rutgers. This is an interesting one. This is a guy that has gone on record as talking about a great relationship with Sterling Lucas. He's been on campus multiple times. He's talked about all the other guys from the DMV that are visiting or that are already committed, that are now on campus. They'll be there when he comes on his visit this weekend. Nick Harbor, the Big Tree, Tosin Babalade, Zabari Sandy, etc. And then you've got Desmond Umeazulu. You've got guys that are committed like Braylon Lee. By the way, did I mention that guy Nicholas Harbor? Even if I did, let's say Nicholas Harbor again, folks. He's on campus right now. So he has been added. D.D. Holmes, as Justin Green, the 4-star big defensive end from Lawrenceville, Georgia. He will not be visiting. Georgia put the screws to him. He committed. Pete Limbo, a.k.a. Pistol Pete, bringing in Mason Love, one of the top punters and kickers in the country, from Riverside, Missouri. He will make an official visit to South Carolina this weekend. So will Fred J.R. Johnson. Imagine if his last name was Ewing. I actually did coach a J.R. Johnson at Goose Creek High School. So, but his name was not Fred J.R. It was just J.R. All right, 4-star safety Kaj Sanders from Bergen Catholic. He visited South Carolina over the weekend. He did an interview with my good friend Phil Kornblut from the Sports Talk Media Network, where he said he's moving up his decision. It was originally set for July the 30th. He's moving it up to July the 8th. He's visited Wisconsin. He visited South Carolina. He's got 3 visits remaining. Those will be, well, Rutgers, North Carolina, and Penn State. He goes on in the article to cite a strong relationship with Torian Gray and the other coaches, and the fact that Torian Gray's track record speaks for itself. All right, so yesterday, I did not mention this on the podcast. I was remiss. Yesterday was the anniversary of D-Day, the Normandy invasion. If you've ever seen the movie Private Ryan, the first, I guess, 10 or 15, 20 minutes, there's not a lot of conversation, but it's loud and it simulates probably the most realistic I've ever seen to that actual day. And a lot of those brave young souls were 16, 17, 18 years old. Let's face it. After the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, America went from an isolationist country to thousands of young men, some of them too young to join the military, but either lying, forging their age, getting their dads to sign the paper for them, or whatever, and they stormed that beach. Many of them died even before they could make it to the beach. And some of the survivors that stormed the beach, that took that bulkhead, that made their way up that hill, that took that ground from Nazi Germany, from the tyranny and evil of Adolf Hitler, and really one of the biggest turning points in the war. You know, when you feel 18, when you're 18, you feel invincible. A lot of those guys said if they'd have been in their 20s, they would have been older. They probably wouldn't have been able to do what they did. But because of their bravery, because of their invincibility, because of their patriotism, America was able to prevail over evil, over the Nazis. And essentially that began the liberation of Germany and the demise of the Third Reich. So I would be remiss if I did not bring that up and say thank you to those brave souls, to the survivors, to the families of those that did not come back, because that's what you sign up for. Also, on that day in 1968, just a couple of months after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. in Memphis, Bobby Kennedy, the brother of John Fitzgerald Kennedy, he was Robert Fitzgerald Kennedy. He had been the Attorney General. He had been a moral compass for his brother. He was getting ready to, he was on a presidential run. He probably would have been elected. He was assassinated going through a hotel in California late at night. He was shot on the night of, I guess, June the 5th, and then died in the hospital on June the 6th. And you think about all the assassinations, from all the other civil rights leaders to John Kennedy, JFK, to Martin Luther King. Bobby Kennedy, he went into the black communities and he marched with Martin Luther King Jr.'s wife and others to help avert riots in the streets, which still took place in other places. But he died way before his time. And I mean, it's like a Greek tragedy. You really couldn't make it up. But anyway, I wanted to mention that. And let's go to, we got to pay some bills here. I would say you can sign up on Patreon for a 7-day free trial membership to Gamecock Pod Daily and Gamecock Pod Live for a VIP membership. And you can check out the Garnet and Black Town Hall, which will be tonight. So we'll be right back with Hale McGranahan after this commercial message.
If you enjoy listening and watching the Free Wednesday show, now live streaming on YouTube, and would love more Gamecock Pod Daily, Join our growing Gamecock family by becoming a monthly or annual subscriber. You'll be able to listen to the show every day of the week and listen to guests like J.C. Sherbert, Hale McGranahan, and John Whittle from thebigspur.com, Colin Taylor and Mike Yuva from Gamecock Central, Emily Adams from the Greenville News, Ben Portnoy, Michael Lanana, and Jeremiah Holloway from GoGamecocks.com, Michael W. Bratton, the host of That SEC podcast, and many, many more. As a VIP subscriber, you can join or listen to the weekly live Zoom call with up to 100 of your favorite Gamecocks and friends. After the show is an unrecorded overtime segment where the real scoop gets dropped and discussed. It's like going down to your local pub or sports bar and having a conversation with your Gamecock friends about last week's football game, men's and women's basketball games, and Gamecock baseball. And of course, there's always recruiting to discuss. In addition to the weekly Zoom call, VIP subscribers get the most popular podcast, The Morning After, which is released every Sunday morning during football season, and more VIP perks are in the works. Follow Keith on Twitter at KAllset, or follow the show on Twitter at Gamecock Pod. Go to the top of the homepage and follow the link. If all else fails, go to patreon.com/Gamecock Pod Daily. Join now and get up to 3 months free off an annual VIP subscription. You will love it, guaranteed. Now, back to Gamecock Pod Live.
All right, we are back, and we are joined by not only the man with the best hair, 2 days in a row on Inside the Gamecocks yesterday, and now today, a well-groomed and well-dressed Hale McGranahan. Hale, how have you been, my friend?
Doing good, doing good. I get my hair cut at Troy's Cutting Edge on Forest Drive and Forest Acres. So if y'all are in the Columbia area, see one of the fellows, Troy or John, they'll get you looking right. It's hard work keeping Columbia handsome, as Troy says, but he does a good job of it.
Well, no doubt about it. Looking outstanding. So, Hale, I am a New York Metropolitans insulter. And there was nothing better than the bottom of the 6th inning last night when the Braves got like 3 consecutive doubles and stormed back and defeated the Mets and sent them to their 4th straight loss. And I'm 20 days away from being in Atlanta and taking my little girl to her first Braves game. She's a lot older than I was when my dad took me to my first Braves game. The Minnesota Twins will be coming to town, and we are sitting in the right field bleachers so she can see the best right fielder in baseball, Robert Acuna Jr.
Yeah, man, maybe she can catch a Matt Olson home run ball too if he pokes one out there for y'all.
Yeah, one section over from the chop house. So I think that's where Pete Alonso's home run landed last night. He killed it. Well, no, maybe it was Lindor. Lindor's home run was in the chop house, in the seats below the chop house. All right, so I know you are a hard-working man, and it is the summer of shame, and it is Cruton season. But before we get to that, your reaction to the death of the wrestling icon, the Iron Sheik.
I certainly respect his place in the wrestling world. His time, I guess, his main era, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, was a little bit before my time when I was a young wrestling fan. But I'm certainly aware him and what he meant to a lot of folks. So my thoughts certainly to his family and all the people who enjoyed watching him do his thing in the wrestling ring.
Yeah, he wore the curly-toed Arab boots, wrestling boots.
Mm-hmm.
I saw him in person. I was telling it at the top of the show. When the Miss South Carolina pageant was in the brown box, the Greenville Memorial Auditorium, Liberty High School hosted Monday Night Wrestling 2 weeks in a row. I think it's in the summer of 79 or 80. And we had it in the gym one Monday night, and then we had it at the football stadium where the Liberty High School Red Devils played their football. Not anymore, but that was in a previous century, my friend, in the late 1970s. I saw all the greats.
I would say wrestling world's a little different these days, thanks to one Vincent McMahon.
No doubt. The Iron Sheik, he was a great follow on Twitter. I always look forward to his Twitter rants. So we'll miss that. All right. So, hey, last Friday, the Summer of Shame 3.0, I guess, kicked off in earnest. But hell, there's a big difference in this summer than previous summers. South Carolina has not had near the number of commitments going in the month of June that they have this year. And so, obviously, the expectations are going to change, right? You're probably not going to get 14 or 10, commitments this summer. I mean, I think they'd probably like to get 8 or 9 commitments, but it's not going to be like it has been where you go from like 2 to 12 or 14.
Right. Yeah. They started in June 2021. I think the number was 4 going into that month. And I think it was 2 last June 22. Then of course it's 9 right now coming into this month. That's what it was. So like you laid it out there, it's going to be a little different. And I've tried my best to temper some expectations for folks who are ready to see this thing get cranked up like it's been the last 2 summers. But I mean, a lot of the excitement's already happened, man. Like you look at this class, and 8 of the 9 guys committed are 4 stars, and I'd have to go back and look, but like there aren't a lot of classes in South Carolina history that have that many 4 stars. Like once they're signed, like when it's all said and done. So I mean, this group's still got several months to go before they sign, and there's certainly going to be more additions, and that number is only going to continue to grow. At least it should. Like I don't want to make any guarantees, but I think it's safe to say that they're going to add to it. The 8 4 stars is what I'm referring to. So do I think there will be some guys who commit to South Carolina this month? Yeah, probably so. You would hope, and I think that's probably a safe bet. Who they're going to be, we'll see. I mean, there are some lower, ranked guys. I say lower ranked, some 3-star type guys who are going to be in town this weekend. Who I would say are probably among that, top tier of candidates of guys who could pop sooner than later. And I'm sure we'll dive into that here in a second. But yeah, I think folks, if they're basing their expectations for this month off of previous Junes, you might be setting yourself up for a little bit of disappointment simply because, again, like a lot of the hay is in the barn, so to speak.
No doubt. We'll get into the commitments. I think all of them are scheduled to visit on the biggest weekend, numbers-wise, and that's June 23rd. No visits Father's Day weekend. Sunbelt Billy, though, they're bringing in a bunch of guys next weekend on Father's Day weekend. Shane Beamer is not.
That's Maybach or Maybach, however you say it. Maybach Billy is what they're calling him down in Gainesville now because they're sticking all the recruits in a Mercedes-Benz Maybach that they're riding them around in. So you might want to check that Sunbelt, Billy Keith. It's Maybach, Billy.
Oh, well, I'm old school. I'm sticking with Sunbelt. That's just
I don't
me.
blame you. I don't blame you.
All right, so let's look back quickly before we look ahead to these weekends. This past weekend, South Carolina hosted 6 official visitors, some for the very first time, some I don't really know how realistic they are or were coming in, like Parker Livingstone. I think the expectation has been for some time that he would pick Texas. By all accounts, it looks like he had a great visit, 6'3", 185 wide receiver from Lucas, Texas, which is up in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex area. Crystal balls to Texas. I think he said after the visit, now he's only going to visit LSU and Texas and then make his decision. So South Carolina is in the final 3, but I just think the pull and the allure of being a lot closer to home here probably will prevail. And I think South Carolina probably feels, really good about their positioning with a couple of other wide receivers, which we'll get to here shortly.
Yeah, and obviously the proximity is a factor as well, Keith. Being just, a couple hours up the road or down the road. I'm not sure of the direction.
About 3.5 hours north. And then, LSU also a lot closer than Columbia, South Carolina, for sure.
Right. And either way, to your point, like you're saying, Texas it's going to be tough to overcome for all the obvious reasons. Several of which you just laid out, but South Carolina certainly giving them something to think about. So, maybe we'll get a surprise there at some point down the road. But, you look at that final weekend of the month, this month when guys can take official visits and he'll be in Austin. So, that's going to be tough to pull off for Carolina.
So also a little known fact, I think, prior to the visit is one of his first scholarship offers came from a guy named Dowell Loggins. Mm-hmm. He was recruiting him for Arkansas, along with Braylon Russell, who was also in for a visit.
That's right, yeah. And Russell was committed to Arkansas. He's from the state, of course, and when I was talking to JC and those guys yesterday, and I kind of laid out the general thought of, hey, when a guy decommits from a school, he usually doesn't recommit to it. It's not unheard of for it to happen, but it's kind of rare. And again, that's like a general thing. I'm not saying that's how it's going to go for this guy, but just something to consider with him as we look at where things are at coming out of last weekend at Carolina. And, he said South Carolina is definitely in his top 3. And I would venture to guess that Arkansas has a spot in that 3 and probably Tennessee as well. And so, yeah, whether it's one of those 2 schools, it's going to be a tough fight for Carolina to be able to reel them in. But again, like Livingstone, they put their best foot forward. They've given them a reason to take an even closer look at Carolina, and we'll see. They got to, of course, survive the next few weeks as he continues to take his official visits. But I don't think it could have gone much better with either one of those 2 guys this past weekend.
I think the key with Braylon Russell, obviously South Carolina's got a great story to sell at running back due to, Marshawn Lloyd leaving, and just the lack of depth and bodies at that position, the future of the position. Certainly they have a great story to tell. It did look like he had a great time, but to me, the key with him is that's his first time on campus.
Yeah.
You generally follow the visits, and I don't know what they've got planned for July. I'm sure they'll have some kind of July activity, maybe maybe not. I think a couple of years ago they did not. Then last year they did. I think that could really be key, is to get him back on campus prior to his decision.
Yeah, that would be massive. And there is something, pun intended, I guess. There will be a cookout type of event at the end of July. But we got him on his 24/7 profile. Russell's decision date is as July 14th. So that cookout will be, can't remember the date exactly. It's like the 25th or something like that. Whenever that window at the end of the month when guys can go on visits again, because there's a dead period for a majority of the month. So assuming he sticks to that decision date, I think there won't be an opportunity for him to come back as an official visitor before hitting, of course. So yeah, that like you said, the follow of the visits is significant, and I believe, I don't know for 100% certainty saying this, but I believe he's taken several unofficial visits to Tennessee. I might need to fact check myself there, but and certainly Arkansas has had him a ton as well. So we'll see. That's a little pause there though when you consider that factor, like you said, Keith, that he's only been to Columbia once. Again, kind of like Parker Livingston.
No doubt. So the one guy South Carolina did make a splash with, not that they just came out of nowhere, but Jalewis Solomon out of Schley County there in Ellaville, Georgia. I think that's in southwest Georgia. A great looking defensive back prospect. He named South Carolina the leader. But the team that's kind of been thought to be the leader has been Florida State, and that visit comes up on the 23rd. How would you handicap that one?
Yeah, that's again kind of along the lines of like, can South Carolina survive that stretch where he's coming off the post-visit high, if you will. Then he's got the official to Florida State scheduled for that June 23rd weekend. And for those who are not familiar with geography in that part of the world, Tallahassee is not very far from where he's from. I don't know the exact distance or drive time, but I think it's significantly closer than Columbia is. Whether that's a factor or not, we'll see. But it's kind of one of those things where it's like, yeah, he's been sort of pegged as a Florida State lean throughout the course of this thing. But you know what, coming out of a visit and calling a team number one is a pretty good sign. And he's been to Columbia, I know, at least twice. He was at the Tennessee game last fall, which certainly speaks for itself. I think everyone knows what kind of atmosphere that was, and how much of an impression an environment like that can make on a recruit. And of course he was back for the spring game earlier this year as well, which sort of along that line of thinking, just a spring game, but it was a big crowd, nice atmosphere, and enjoyable visit for him and a lot of other guys as well. I mean, Daniel Hill, the running back from Mississippi, came out of that visit talking about South Carolina being his number one. So he's had now 3 really good trips to Columbia, and you gotta like where South Carolina's standing is with him, and just see how things transpire, down the stretch. And I don't know if he's necessarily looking to decide this summer, because he's only got the 2 official visits scheduled. Maybe he's a guy who tries to take things into the fall and prolongs this thing. So we'll see. But it certainly helps that he's had two really good unofficial visit opportunities at Carolina.
All right, so one other guy I wanted to ask quickly before we move ahead. Bergen Catholic safety Kaj Sanders. I guess my guy Phil Kornblut got an interview with him. He said he's moving up his decision, which was scheduled for July 30th to now July the 8th, coming off his visit to South Carolina. Visited Wisconsin, I guess, the last weekend in May. Visited South Carolina. Will visit Rutgers, North Carolina, and Penn State. Really cited, the obvious here, a defensive back, Torian Gray. It really doesn't get any better than that if you're South Carolina, with that track record and the relationships that he builds with the guys that he's recruiting. How would you kind of handicap that one? Because I think Sanders is a guy that's got family from South Carolina.
I'm not sure if he's one of the guys from that part of the country that does or not. If you've heard that, then you're I'll trust what you're saying. But I know there are a few other guys from the Northeast who do have that. As far as South Carolina's standing with him and what those chances are, I don't know how necessarily high up the board he is. Like, let's consider that they've already got a safety committed, Kelvin Hunter. He ain't going anywhere. And they've got a few other guys that they've been recruiting and will bring it in for visits. One of whom is Malcolm Ziegler from North Carolina, who I think is really good. I think it's safe to say he's probably a better prospect than Sanders. He's a big guy who can run. Jarvis Boatwright, who committed to Southern Cal over the weekend, and was scheduled to visit this coming weekend at South Carolina. And I don't know if that's changed. I think it probably has. But I bring it up to kind of finish my point with Sanders is like, I don't know if he's necessarily, highly thought of as maybe like a guy that they're ready to take right this second. Maybe they are. I'm speculating a little bit that way, but I do know that they like the Ziegler guy who's big and can run. Sort of reminds me a little bit of Nicky Manworthy, just in the way he profiles physically and some of his measurables. And yeah, so we'll see. I wouldn't be surprised if Sanders ends up being a guy who stays closer to home, and by closer to home, I mean at Rutgers. I don't know that Penn State is necessarily super high on him either. Like he's got the official visit scheduled, and I think he might be a little bit down their board at safety as well. So we'll see. It is interesting that he moved his date up coming out of the visit to South Carolina. It is interesting that he put Rutgers in as an official visit this month. So maybe that could be the move for him, and we'll see how things shake out this weekend with Ziegler. And he's got some other visits coming up as well. Clemson just offered him, so whether or not they're going to be a factor, we'll see. But yeah, I think that he, being Ziegler, might be a little more highly regarded, is what I'm trying to say.
As would Cameron Michael from Statesboro, Georgia.
Yeah,
who will visit this weekend.
And whether he's a cornerback or a safety, I don't know for sure one way or the other. But I think cornerback, but he could certainly play safety. I'm pretty sure George is recruiting him as a safety as well. And I certainly like him. I think Kyle Sanders, regardless of position too. So there are plenty of irons in the fire at that position for Carolina. It's not like he's the only one, Kyle Sanders.
All right, so a lot of dudes, I mean, even if Boatwright does not visit this weekend, that would still put it at 9. There have been some visits that have been scheduled recently. Let's talk about the camp guy, Fred J.R. J.A.Y. capital R. Johnson, 6'3.5", 225 pounds. I turn on the film. The guy's playing wide receiver. He runs like a deer. He's playing outside linebacker. He's playing inside linebacker. He's rushing the passer. He's dropping off into space. I mean, to me, he's a guy that probably a little bigger, but a lot like Nick Eamon-Warry, a guy that just come out of nowhere that's a big, rangy athlete that, hell, when they took Eamon Warry, they didn't know if he'd be a corner, safety, or a linebacker, but the guy's definitely an SEC guy. He gets that offer at camp, and then he bumps Rutgers, and he's coming back this weekend. That's got to be a good thing.
Yeah, and he's got – I would assume – I don't know for sure that he's still got East Carolina scheduled for next weekend and Virginia Tech scheduled for the following weekend. But you got to feel pretty good if he's willing to move one official visit and get back immediately. Makes me kind of wonder if he didn't want to bump Virginia Tech from that June 23rd weekend as like kind of a sign of respect, and maybe still take that visit. I don't know. We'll see. But it's good that he was ready to get back down, and he was already talking about scheduling that official visit, last Friday as he was leaving town in Columbia. So. It was one of those guys that we see him every year at camp, Keith. I'm standing there with Chris Clark from Gamecock Central, and we see this guy walk by, and who is that? Like, he looks like a dude. Like, he looks like somebody. Like, that's kind of our joke with Chris and Wes is like, I don't know, we don't know who that is, but he looks like somebody, so we need to figure it out. And sure enough, he had 10 plus offers and was a candidate to get one from the staff, and they certainly liked what they saw and made it happen. So it'd be an interesting get to pair him with Wendell Gregory if that's what happens. Two bigger body linebackers who are good athletes, who've shown some ability to run on tape for sure. And we got to see it in person on Friday with Fred Johnson, no doubt.
All right, so one guy that was on campus that has not set an official visit yet, but you follow the visits, 4-star wide receiver Keelan Adams from Virginia Beach, Green Run High School, 6'1", 6'2", 175, very graceful, high points the ball, can really run, can really catch it. He was there with Dante Reno and Mazio Bennett, those guys working out together. It's his second trip in less than a month. But he does have official visits this month to Alabama and Virginia Tech. But I know Chris Clark entered an on-3 prediction for South Carolina. How close are you to entering a crystal ball pick for Keelan Adams?
Yeah, pretty close. I think the biggest thing that's given me pause, and it's pretty big, is that official visit to Alabama he's got, which I think is Father's Day weekend. He'll be going out there for the first time. But he hadn't been before. Tuscaloosa's, a little bit of a drive from up there, as is Columbia, but he was still willing to hop on a plane and fly down this past weekend and spend some time with Dante Reno and Mazio Bennett and Justin Stepp and Dow Loggins, and get to know Shane Beamer a little bit better. So feel really good about South Carolina. Just kind of wait and see where Alabama's at with him. And I think Alabama's probably in the mix with a lot of really good receivers. I don't know what their class looks like. I don't know. They might have some guys committed right now. I'd have to go back and check. And again, I don't know who else is on their board, much less where Keelan Adams stacks up on them. But if they're bringing him in for an official visit, obviously they like him to a certain degree. So we'll see. He's talked about, coming to South Carolina for an official visit in the fall. Like, that was a thing that he had already kind of discussed, back in what would have been April when he came down for that first unofficial. I think his Virginia Tech official is at the end of this month, and maybe that's one that he doesn't want to bump out of the way as well, being a Virginia guy. And maybe we shouldn't just write them off automatically just because they haven't had much success in the past. Maybe that'll change down the road. But I guess, again, my point in saying that is, like, in-state school, got to be a degree of respect for the coaching staff and not to want to, burn any bridges if you're folks who work at Green Run High School or Maury High School in Norfolk. So yeah, I think South Carolina's in really good shape there, and he certainly is a guy who would be a tremendous get. Like you mentioned, his skills and what he adds to the table from that standpoint, but he's got the body and the frame to be a pretty good sized receiver. I'm not going to sit here and say like he'll be like 6'2", 220 pounds like Xavier Legette is, but when he was coming out of Mullins High School, he was pretty similar build, size, stature, and all that frame. So maybe one day down the road we're looking at Keelan Adams as this big specimen type of guy who catches the ball a little bit better than Legette, but maybe not quite as good after the catch. Either way, it would be an awesome get, a nice compliment pair, whatever you want to call it, to Mazio Bennett and potentially some of those other guys like a Jonathan Taylor who South Carolina's in on as well.
Yeah, I mean, that was Paylor was the other guy I was alluding. I mean, I think if you had a high school class of Mazio Bennett, Jonathan Paylor, and Keelan Adams, I think if you're Justin Stepp, you'd feel awfully, awfully good about that.
Yeah, and I like receiver groups to have some diversity. That's my thing. I think maybe there's some line of thinking that's kind of crept up here recently with the way like the Rams do things on offense, where they like to have guys who are just kind of interchangeable and can mix and match them in different areas, which, Sean McVay is obviously better at figuring that stuff out than I am, like understatement of the century. But nonetheless, like I think that it's good to have some guys who are a little bit different in the way they play that position, because not all receiver positions are the same position. Like they're in the same group and have the same label to a degree. But Jonathan Paylor isn't. If he's at South Carolina playing with Keelan Adams, like they're not going to be running the same types of routes, doing the same types of things within the offense, that just simply because they're different types of players, different body types, different skill sets to a degree.
All right, so man, I feel like we just got going and our time's up. And I asked you for 30 minutes. Have you got like 2 more minutes, or if you need to go, we're going to let you go?
Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, thanks. So I want to ask about some guys that have not scheduled visits that are names that we have heard of. One of them's coming to camp. That's Dak Brinkley, the son of Jasper Brinkley, the nephew of Casper Brinkley, who we don't really know how big he is. Some places he's listed 6'3", some places 6'4", 225, maybe 6'3", 220. Is he a linebacker? Is he an edge? Is he an SEC player? Is there room for him? I guess we're going to find out on June 21st. From your sources, how big is that workout or for him? And, could you see him working his way into the class?
Yeah, I haven't talked to a lot of folks about him. I'm just kind of based what I'm about to say off of my sort of personal evaluation of him and just kind of looking at his highlights. And I don't know that he is like the body type that you need at defensive end, at least like a full-time type of guy. I look at the tape and it's pretty good. Doesn't wow me. Doesn't pop. Is like kind of what I'd like to say as like my go-to phrase. It just like, I'm not sitting here saying he's not a good player by any means. I mean, he is, but I think he's probably a linebacker, and I don't know that there would necessarily be a spot for him at that position, especially if they add Fred Johnson to the class before them. Maybe they decide to make room for him and whatever, and we'll see him in person in camp, and kind of how that goes. But I've had some reservations about where he profiles and and all that. And obviously, if he's not the son of a former South Carolina player, probably not even talking about him. Like a guy from that part of Texas. I mean, maybe he's got some interest in South Carolina if they're coming after him, but I don't get the sense that South Carolina's really pursued him that heavily to this point. Maybe that's changed since Travian Robertson's come on, but we'll see. I don't want to make it sound like I'm dogging the kid by any means, but I don't know. I think folks have gotten a little too aggressive with their want for this kid, and potentially setting him up for disappointment if he ends up coming here and doesn't turn out to be this great player. Maybe I'm wrong. Like maybe he is better than I'm sitting here trying to say. I'm pretty sure 24/7's got him as a 4-star, and I don't necessarily agree with all the rankings and ratings. We've talked a lot about that over the years, Keith, but I just, I'd like to see him in person and see how he moves, and maybe try to go from there. But I just, again, not a guy who really wows me when I watch his highlights.
All right, so these guys are defensive ends or defensive tackles. Some recent guys, some Travian Robertson guys, but Tyler Simmons, the son of former North Carolina and NFL first-round pick Brian Simmons, Windermere Prep right outside of Orlando, 6'4", 260. Very similar to Travian Robertson after he got to Carolina. Probably a guy that'll grow into a defensive tackle. How about him? Quantavious Johnson out of Mays High School in Atlanta, 6'5", 255. And Darian Mayo, 6'7", 245 out of Good Counsel High School. Do you think those guys are going to end up showing up on campus this summer?
Mayo probably not, unless he comes in as an unofficial visitor and or moves an official visit to make room for South Carolina. But I don't think he's going to be in at some point this month again, unless one of those things happens. The other one, Justin Simmons? Is that it?
Yeah.
The first one you said? Yeah, I think he intends to visit at some point. I don't know if anything's been scheduled yet. I haven't checked on him here in about a week or so. I guess probably since first of last week. But it is a potential guy who could be in at some point. And the second name you mentioned, who was it?
Quantavious Johnson, 6'5", 255 out of Mays in Atlanta.
Yeah, we'll see. Another one that I haven't checked on in a while. And one of the more recent defensive ends from this class to get an offer from Sterling Lucas. So maybe that could change, or maybe it's already changed by now. I need to probably check on that as soon as I get off the air with you, Keith, and on those guys. But yeah, as you start to see some of these other guys come off the board that South Carolina's been in on, like a Justin Green, who's committed to Georgia after the official visit there last weekend. Maybe there's some other names to really keep an eye on, but they're going to keep a spot warm for Mr. Dylan Stewart. That's for sure. That's going to be one of the two spots, maybe three spots that it's always going to have room. They're always going to have room for. So we'll see. Dede Holmes is kind of in that conversation now too. I would think, especially with, again, Cameron Fountain, another guy who they're pretty high on, who's committed to Southern Cal now. So as the board's kind of reshuffling with some of those things, maybe a guy like Quintavious Johnson gets a real big push. But I think Tennessee's in on him as well, and I think he's got an official visit scheduled there maybe this coming weekend. I'd have to double check, but yeah, like I said, I need to check on some of those guys, especially after Fountain and Green have come off the board.
All right, so we talked about Malcolm Ziegler. We talked about Fred J.R. Johnson. We talked about Cameron Michael. But outside of those guys, the other visitors for this weekend, particularly like Elijah Newby, Matthew Fuller, and Nnamdi Egwoko, 6'4", 335 from South Garner. That's a Travian Robertson guy. And then Mason Love, the punter, who Pistol Pete Limbo is bringing in from Riverside, Missouri. Who are the guys to really pay attention to that maybe could be on commitment watch? Like, not immediately, because like JC said, now all these guys, they want to make a big social media production and have their edit or their video for their commitment, etc. And maybe it's in July, maybe it's later in June. But I know Matthew Fuller's a guy you said could be a day of arrival crystal ball pick. Outside of him, who are the more intriguing guys for you this weekend? And we'll wrap it up with that. Maybe we can get you back on to talk about June 23rd another time.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. As far as what you're saying with Fuller, I still kind of leaning towards that being the case. I think you probably put Fred Johnson in that category as well. Mason Love, who I don't think technically has an offer yet, but if they're bringing him in for an official visit here in June, I think it's probably safe to say that'll happen at some point. I don't know that he would necessarily commit on the spot. I mean, he's got an offer from Cal and like the service academies in Arkansas State, but I think Carolina could probably beat those folks for him if that's what it comes to. So those are kind of, to answer your question, Keith, those are sort of that category of guys like Fred Johnson, Matthew Fuller, and potentially Love, assuming an offer is extended, as some folks who could be jumping into this class sooner than later. Fuller took the official visit to Georgia Tech last weekend. I don't know that he's going to have any others scheduled for this month. I mean, his other offers are, group of five, like UCF has offered. Maybe they're sort of a tweener that way, or maybe they're about to not be group of five. So we'll see. But I think South Carolina could probably feel pretty good about beating UCF on a recruit, especially one who plays for Connor Shaw's brother. But anyway, so yeah, those three guys are sort of in that realm of possibility of guys who could be a hashtag welcome home from Old Shane.
So who is the biggest competition for Elijah Newby, Malcolm Ziegler, and Nasir Johnson?
With Johnson, I would say probably Florida. There might be some others involved, maybe Florida State. Ziegler, like I mentioned, he's got the Clemson offer. He hadn't scheduled an official visit to my knowledge. I think North Carolina is probably the safest bet right now, like the biggest competition. He's got an official there. He's got an official to Notre Dame as well. So I don't know. You can sit here and write them off at this point. And with Newby, he took the official to Southern Cal this past weekend. He's got Penn State coming up, and I think he's got one to Stanford as well. So I would venture a guess that Penn State is probably, up there a little higher than the others, including South Carolina, from a proximity standpoint. So yeah, I would say those are probably the main contenders for that set of guys.
Hale, I can't thank you enough. Great stuff as always. The hardest working man on the Gamecock football recruiting beat. Check him out on thebigspur.com. Hale, I know you'll be all over these visits. If anybody gets added or deleted, you'll have it. Thanks again for being with us, and hopefully we can get you back to preview that June 23rd weekend.
For sure. Let's do it. Appreciate you having me on as always, Keith. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Go Braves. All right, that was Hale McGranahan, the man in Gamecock football recruiting. All right, so that's going to be a wrap for today's show. You got all your recruiting news, and I don't know who else is bringing up the Iron Sheik today that actually saw him in person, but I did. Hopefully the Braves will make it 2 in a row over the New York Metropolitans. So until tomorrow on the Big Thursday show, we'll probably have more football recruiting. And tomorrow I'm going to break down an article from the athletic.com on their quarterback tiers for this season. And I'll tell you where I agree and where I disagree. And we'll get into some football magazine previews for the Gamecocks for this upcoming season. And we may even have some basketball stuff tomorrow. Obviously, the regionals coming up this weekend, Gamecocks and Gators. Friday at 6 p.m. in Gainesville, where all the Gators will be wearing their jorts and tank tops. So thanks for tuning in. Joseph did have a question in the chat. Did the transfer from Syracuse commit? Yes, he did. Jasius Gear, 6'6", 260, originally from Belton Honeypath. He is on campus now, is my understanding. And a guy that probably will be a starter at defensive end, a guy JC's very high on. I like his film. He's a quick twitch, really long, athletic guy, and more in the mold of a Brad Lawing type of pass rusher. And I think the sky's the limit for him. So thanks to everybody for tuning in. Don't forget to click the subscribe button on the YouTube channel. Hit the like button. Give us a 5-star ranking if you would. And I will be back tomorrow. Remember, you can get that 7-day free trial. It's early in June. The Garnet and Black Town Hall's coming up tonight. Can't wait to sit around and talk to a bunch of my favorite Gamecocks and friends. That's the one thing that we do that nobody else in the market does it. It's a live, interactive town hall meeting. The Garnet and Black Town Hall. It's one of my favorite parts of the week. It is like going down to your favorite pub and just sitting around and having a drink and talking with a bunch of your Gamecock buddies. I know I'll be having a cold beer tonight during the Garnet and Black Town Hall. I'll probably have the Braves game on in my office, but mostly we'll be talking about Gamecocks and recruiting. And so it's sign up today for the free 7-day trial for a VIP membership, and you can join us on the Garnet and Black Town Hall. If you don't like it, you can cancel at any time, or you can just stay and be a part of our Gamecock community. It's all-inclusive, and we get together and chop it up, and sometimes we agree to disagree, and we all speak our mind and have a great time. So until tomorrow, this has been Gamecock Pod Live, Hale McGranahan. What a great show. All right, I'm out of here, guys. God bless, and go Gamecocks.